I'm Ben Johnson. I host a podcast called Codebreaker. We have tote bags over there, public radio tote bags, if you have need for those things. Thanks a lot for being here. I'm going to start with what we call a self-ID in radio. So I'm going to get all of you to basically say who you are and very simply what you do, if that's okay. Let's start with Isabelle.
My name is Isabelle Bourduas. I come from a company called Minority VR. And Minority, I'm a VR producer. Minority was founded a year ago through the merger of two companies, a film and TV production company and an independent gaming studio. We produced the first entirely VR game in the Oculus Store. It's 10 hours of VR gameplay. It's called Time Machine VR. And so we really tried to see what works in VR and what doesn't work, what will make you sick, what will make you excited, what will make you emotionally engaged. And I think we have few secrets.
Awesome.
Ken?
I'm Ken Perlin. I'm a professor in the Department of Computer Science at New York University. I do research in what we call future reality. And our work was heavily inspired by this guy.
Thank you. Steve Feiner.
So my name is Steve Feiner. I am a professor of computer science at Columbia University. I do research on a variety of different aspects of user interfaces, how people interact with computers and each other through computers. And a lot of it has to do with augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, and 3D stuff in general. And I'm very inspired by this guy.
You can just do this all day.
Let the love continue.
Should I say the same thing like that? Yeah. I'm Chaki Inc. Here at Viacom. We run a team called Viacom Next. Long story short, is a R&D team. I work for the CTO, and my goal is to really bridge the gap for emerging technologies to when they actually have scale for a big company like this. So we do a lot of different experiments, prototypes, working with academic institutions like NYC Media Lab to the MITs and CMUs of the world, and really try to get to a feel of what the landscape is as it's rapidly evolving. So have labs and everything upstairs, and really been following legends like the two gentlemen next to me the past years, just to really understand what we can do and what we cannot do. So happy to be here.
All right, I'm going to start with you again, Chaki, and come back this way, everyone. What is reality?
Yeah, can I take a picture first with all of you?
Oh yeah, do it.
So is that reality?
I mean, I think all of it, or many of us in the audience might want to be escaping reality this week.
Yeah, I know.
So can you talk about what you think reality is and how it's different from virtual reality?
So last I've been thinking about it, the first thing I was going back to was, the real world that we're in. Sometimes these days you're on your phone and you're on the screens, and you just forget that it's amazing, right? You can have 5 senses: see, feel, touch, smell. And I feel like that, to me, is almost a bar that's unwritten right now for a lot of the VR, AR projects that are aiming to get to.
All the senses.
The senses. Really, how do you trick your senses in some way? That might be a term that you might not agree with. But today, a lot of the headsets that we'll see today, demos and everything, they're playing with your vision, your hearing. And I think we're starting to figure out, haptic, tangible. Like if I see a chair there in the future wearing magically by HoloLens, how do I know that's the real one? What if I go and sit down and I fall down, right? So, and what if the chair is actually there, but it looks like something else that we can projection map and do other things to it? So I don't know if I can answer the question.
Yeah, it's a strange question.
In only 2 minutes,
yeah.
But like
the senses. You're saying the senses.
Well, I feel like the long path, and I haven't watched Black Mirror or anything, but try to be positive here, right? But like the long-term path seems to be a world where we could be in a room like this, and some of the stuff are real, some of the stuff are not here, some of the stuff may be from the past. My grandparents who passed away long ago could be here, right? And we could be having, if AI is really getting there in 5 to 10 years, they could be talking to me, interacting with me with educated simulations. So I think that could be a world that we're trying to head to without everyone having all the pieces together. But at the end of the day, at that point, I might look back and say, I miss the days when I just see things normally the way it was. Otherwise, I don't know what's real, what's not. Is that Steve? Is that Ken? So that's kind of my answer to your question.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Cool. Steve?
Okay, so what you've just described, that room in which you're not quite sure there's something is real, and you can sit and literally walk up to, see visually, maybe hear if it scrapes along the floor, a chair, and then sit in it and have it support you, okay, is what Ivan Sutherland described 51 years ago, the gentleman who essentially created interactive computer graphics, as being the ultimate display. And the talk that he gave in which he described it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek. There were chairs you could sit in, bullets that could be fatal, handcuffs that would be confining, kind of morbid imagery, actually. We're nowhere near there right now, but the idea is that reality, at least to me, is everything that I'm surrounded by. Historically, it has had nothing to do with computers. I'm surrounded by the things I can perceive with my senses. My body interacts with the world. I sit in things. I think of myself as sitting. I perceive things visually. I can hear things, smell, taste, feel, etc. So that's reality. And more, we're getting to the point at which we're going to be able to, at first using things that are fairly clunky, like all the things that you're going to see around you at the demo sessions, add to what it is that you're seeing or replace what it is that you're seeing and feeling and hearing and touching, etc., with stuff that's virtual. So I think ultimately it's all reality because it's all stuff you're experiencing. Just some of it happens to be provided to you in a way that's much more novel and uses computers than we've been able to do it in the past.
So around the same time, Ivan Sutherland was describing the ultimate display. Gene Roddenberry and his team were putting together
Creator of Star Trek.
Star Trek, and so you had the one of the things they talked about was the communicator. And at the time, everyone was like, wow, this communicator is amazing, a thing in everyone's pocket, or something that just translates from any language to any other. So, and that was almost a decade ago. And so I think that we forget that whatever the current state of technology is, in about 5 minutes, it just becomes reality. I mean, we were just talking, I was talking last night to some friends, we were discussing that 130 years ago, all of a sudden everybody started having conversations with invisible avatars of other people that were thousands of miles away. But that's a telephone, that's not technology, but of course, if you presented the telephone to Jane Austen, she might have freaked out. Like, whoa, you mean we don't have to run around having our servants run notes back and forth, So I think that what's exciting about now, what's always exciting about working in a field where Moore's Law is true, is that you're always feeling like everything's about to change. And we should enjoy this because when we're putting on those hologlasses and everyone has them 10 years from now, people will wonder what the excitement was about. So we should enjoy it while it's just beginning to be invented.
Sure. Isabelle?
Well, the first time I tried virtual reality was a year and a half ago, and the experience was Felix and Paul, the Mongolian yurt. And as a filmmaker, I remember being completely shaken because at that point I could see this family of Mongols, be with them in their yurt, sharing a meal with them. And there was a big pot of I don't know what on the fire going, and I felt like I could smell what was in that pot. And I thought, wow, that's where 2D and virtual reality, the limits of 2D for me had been shattered completely.
So your sense of smell was provoked even though you couldn't smell anything. It was just sort of the 360-degree experience that was.
And I think that's the big difference between 2D and virtual reality is that virtual reality will leave an emotional memory, a physical memory. Whereas if you're watching a film or reading a book, you'll have an intellectual memory, a visualization of what you're reading, of what you're watching. But virtual reality will leave a physical memory. And I think that reality is that. It's what you feel, really. And that's the only thing that's real.
So I think this might actually be a good opportunity to play the first clip from the podcast that I brought. And just to sort of set this up a little bit, this is Chris Milk, who many of you may have heard of. He has a company called Within. It makes virtual reality experiences. And we interviewed him as part of a whole episode of our podcast, Codebreaker, about virtual reality, augmented reality, and how it's being used in all different ways. Just to describe really quickly, what Codebreaker does is it asks one fundamental question about technology each season, and we apply that question to a kind of technology in each episode. So this is from our virtual reality episode, and I think it should be your first clip there, Chris Milk.
Artists are often early adopters. In lots of ways, they're really entrepreneurs for technology that has a huge impact on our lives. The good ones are good storytellers. One of the top entrepreneurs and storytellers in the virtual reality world right now is Chris Milk. His company, Within, makes virtual reality experiences, deep-sea diving in Indonesia, the life of a child refugee fleeing war. When I met him at an event here in New York, Chris Milk said that this new technology has something really unique and important to offer.
A world that has the fidelity that it is indiscernible from our present world that we live in today.
Basically, alternate realities that are just as good as the real thing. Because of this, Chris says virtual reality is going to make it easier than ever to live the experiences of other people. People who have lives we will never have in places we might never go. In a word, empathy.
The advancement of the technology behind virtual reality will lead to the democratization of human experience in the way that the internet led to the democratization of data and information. Right now, a kid in a remote village in a very foreign country that has a smartphone has access to more data than the president of the United States did 20 years ago, right?
Right.
So it's a little bit quiet there, but he's talking about virtual reality as this really democratizing platform when you're talking about the human experience. Does that make you guys think about anything? Chaki?
It does. I mean, seeing some friends from IDEO, the term empathy means a lot to me these days. And, you know, in this building, for example, right, you know, we try to oftentimes have layers of communications or understanding of what problems we were trying to solve. So as an example, I used to build apps for MTV. Right, so just to debate whether the screen should look like this or the button should be like that, right? These days we do a lot of user research and approaches, but it's really hard to communicate that all the way to up the chain, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So I just want to put the headset on all the executives in the building, right? This is what an 18-year-old do when they're in their house. Like, this is not how they're sitting down like this watching the TV. They're doing all these other things. Of course, today, as of today, we all know that's the case.
Sure.
But I like the next thing, right? Whatever that next behavior is going to be. It's just really hard to talk to people in PowerPoints. So I'd rather do that, right? And one other example I would say would be my team do all these prototypes, and one time I was having my kids in my own lab, showing them a couple things. Wasn't sure if they're allowed to wear them. They say 13-year-old older, but they put them on, and my younger one say, "Well, what do you mean? What am I supposed to do?" And she was down here. Her head level was underneath everything else we create, right? That it was created for a guy or a lady, 5 feet plus, and she's only like 3 feet tall. Right. I'm like, catch the apple, take that. And she's like, I don't know what you're talking about there. So like stuff like that, right? And then we were talking about scale, and now bring me to very high, very big to very small, and imagine a little nano robot with a 360 cam that I can control and go into the forest would be something that would be amazing that I would do all day long, right? So I think that empathy one really hits home for me.
That's an interesting idea. Steve?
Okay, so I think that the ability to have what you might think of as being the sort of first-person experience, and especially wide field of view filling experiences visually, are very, very compelling to people, are very, very emotionally engaging. It's part of the reason, using an older technology, why you get more out of and maybe get more scared if it's a scary movie, let's say, out of going to a movie theater with a big screen than if you were watching the same movie at home, let's say, on a much smaller screen. Now, all that said, and it's, I think, incredibly important to a lot of the experience that you're literally feeling like you're surrounded by it in a very emotional way. I think we have to be a little careful with that word empathy. because while you can really make experiences that make people feel as if they, or at least think they feel, as if they are the person whose eyes they're seeing through or at the place at which they're looking at it, you really are looking at it through your own eyes. And so if I watch, for example, a video designed to show me the life of someone who has lived a life very different from mine, maybe it would be good if I come out feeling very sympathetic towards them, but I'm not them. I'm not processing the things that I'm seeing and hearing through the same brain that they are. And so I think we have to be a little careful that you would think that you could put on eyewear and then come away thinking, now I know what it's like to be because it's a little bit like going on a tour of a place in the flesh, in person, and then thinking, now I know what it's like to actually live in this little village, because you don't. Although maybe
your perspective is your own, no matter what.
Your perspective is your own. You can get maybe some appreciation of it, but you're not really going to come away knowing what it's like.
Can you tell me a little bit about HoverMat? We're changing directions a little bit, but I'm interested in I guess how that might put you in a different place, this project.
Oh, right. So we've been doing a lot of work, as everyone else here has, with what people think of as VR, AR. Put in a headset and you're somewhere else, you look around. One of the things that we started doing is wanting to engage your full body, because, there is this sense of, you see people and it's just a floating head, or maybe it's a floating head and two floating hands or Vive controllers. But of course, when we interact with people and when we experience the world, we go all the way down to our feet. And we were kind of a little worried that we would form this sort of cultural norm because of the limitations of technology, that everybody would start thinking themselves as just, a head and two hands. So
a head and two hands.
A head and two hands.
Yeah. Because you're using controllers and
that's just what you are in VR.
Right.
So HoverMat is a technology that came out of our lab that then we created a spin-off company that allows you to stand on this, basically a pressure imaging mat. It's sort of like a flat mat that's a high quality video camera for pressure. Okay. So you wiggle your toes, you lean on one side, you lean on the other, and it's getting that image of how your feet are impinging on the floor. And so if you stand on this and you put on your VR headset and you add the right software, you can start doing things like flying around on a magic flying carpet, but you can also build a full body avatar that other people can see, and you can start reading each other's body language. And the reason we're using something like a mat as opposed to, say, something like Microsoft Kinect is that this can go anywhere. This is just a mat. It's just on the floor. It's very easy.
Right. You just drop it on the floor and you can.
And yeah.
What are the applications of it? I mean, I saw one application that looked really fun. It looked like you basically are surfing around on a floating carpet.
Well, interestingly enough, the other applications, we just did a big study with the NYU Medical School in helping to assess balance. There's some pretty serious applications. Not to get too technical, but basically for people who are over 65 years old in the U.S., the number one cause of death that's not heart disease or cancer is falling. And so if you can catch that early, you save millions of lives. And having something really affordable, especially now that things like VR headsets, where you can say, oh, let's give you a visual experience and then understand how you respond, how your body responds to that. You can catch what the causes are that will lead to eventually falling long before existing technologies can. So we're actually really excited about the serious applications.
Because we're going to have an aging population. A lot of the folks who are older now are living by themselves. Right. Figuring out ways to apply this technology to their daily life could be really helpful.
But again, what's really exciting is that, that's just a technology. Then you start doing all these different things with it, and it's kind of like saying, okay, we have books. What's a book about? Well, now we have to start using our imagination. And so we're finding the same thing with assessing balance.
Huh. Isabelle, can you talk a little bit about the time machine game and how a producer thinks about virtual reality maybe slightly differently than producing for a film or something like that?
Yeah, I want to come back a little bit on what you were saying.
Oh yeah,
because
go ahead.
I think that the medical applications of VR are so exciting. We're working, with a number of pediatricians who are treating children's phobias. And one of the things that VR does in a more powerful manner than 2D was doing is pre-visualization.
What does that mean?
Well, by putting children in a situation that they're afraid of in, little increments, a little bit at a time, and in such a powerful, it's such a powerful way to visualize a situation that these children are, agoraphobics. They find themselves in a crowd, but they still feel protected because they know the doctor is around, and they know,
that it's just a game, as it were.
It's just a game. But you see them slowly opening up, and each session, one after the other, becoming like more and more solid and safe and secure, and it's just fantastic. One of the things, so we're working a lot with doctors in education as well. The opening children to, the compassion thing, for sure, like taking them to refugee camps through VR, making them understand, what they can't see. The ability to travel with VR, taking you to a different world. Old people, that can't travel anymore. My dad, who's walking around with, tubes in his nose, and he can't go anywhere anymore, and traveling was his passion. Now, we shot some footage in India. He was crying because all of a sudden he's in India, and just like me, he could smell the people, and he could hear the turmoil around him and see the colors, and he was there, and I think that's just like incredible. It's so amazing.
So when you set out to work on a project, how do you do that? If you're making virtual reality, how do you do that as a producer?
Well, right now we're working on with Google on an IP to launch Daydream, and we really questioned ourselves, like, what is most exciting and efficient in VR?
Okay.
And when you first put on the headset, 80% of people will say, what can I do? Because it feels so real that you want to interact with.
You want to run around and do stuff and pick things up. And
And so we think that there are two very important things in VR, or the keys are communication with others. When the internet first came, we thought that's going to cut individuals from talking to each other because they'll be on the net all day. And the opposite happened. We're in
for better and worse.
For better and worse, but it's brought humans together, and I think that the social aspect of VR is super important. So we're working on developing technologies that will help us travel in a different place, but while being able to invite your friends and your beloved one to do it with you. So that's one of the things that we're working on. The other thing is storytelling, and that's very challenging, as a filmmaker, to once you give people the ability to, what a director does in 2D is making choices. And can we still tell a good story when we're allowing people who are not storytellers to make these choices?
Right, you're putting the power in their hands to move around the environment how they want to.
So we spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Chaki, would you mind talking a little bit about how Viacom thinks about this social aspect? Because I'm sure that's a big thing that the company is thinking about when it comes to VR.
Yeah, I think everyone should think about that. The example that was amazing outside of this room was that Oculus Connect demo that Mark Zuckerberg gave, right? So at one point he was at his home, the dog, he's virtual, the wife dialing from Skype, being a real person, and two colleagues who might be somewhere else. So to your point about that communications and collaboration, that I'm most excited about by stuff like that personally.
Sure.
Where in the future, surgery room, astronauts, you can bring the smartest people for the right job together for 15 minutes and you're done. Then go on Slack afterwards, right? The company, like most others, probably still at a very early stage for VR. How many people own at home a VR headset personally? And keep your hands up if they are an Oculus Rift or HTC Vive. Oh, awesome. So there's some hands in here, but we're far from the point where we right? My goal is to really just show them what's possible, not thinking about making money on a lot of these stuff. But back to the question about social, we got a few projects that we're trying to launch, and also some of them experimental. But in music, for example, we got interactive music videos where you could, see. One of those is all animated. The other one, we actually do volumetric capture of the artist, so you could be dancing around the band, so to speak, right? Which is something that 360 video doesn't give you.
On the stage with Kanye.
Exactly.
I'm into it.
Yeah. Beyonce or whoever, or Maroon 5, right? But we're at that first stage right now. We just started in December, so next step is to really bring the other friends in there and start dancing. I know Ken has some projects that you can do that with a lot of people. Same thing for like any journey stuff around storytelling, right? Imagine which happened on Indiana Jones, right? When the ball chases you, now I can be with, someone else being, trying to stay away from that giant ball, whatever that is, down the road.
That's a great scene. I would love to run from that giant bowling ball that's about to crush me.
I just feel like many things in real life, you want to do it with other people.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be 500 all the time, but, I think any project could add the benefit of adding one more person to it, I guess. But,
Ken?
Oh, okay. Well, I think oh, that's right. I think that even more fundamental than that is the distinction between situations where people are somewhere else and situations where they are physically in the same place. And I think no matter how advanced technology gets, let me ask, how many people here are not here physically? That's even fewer than the number who own a Vive or one of those things. So I think, even with all the advanced technology, we still gather with our bodies and get into a room with other people. And I don't think we do that because of limitations of technology. I think we do that because of stuff that goes beyond and has pretty much nothing to do with technology. So I think of the things that Mark Zuckerberg shows, et cetera, as being the evolution of the telephone, the evolution of Skype, the evolution of that kind of thing. They're going to get better and better and better, but they are not going to replace people physically being together. That's a lot of our research, Steve's research, Maria Lanton over there at Emily Carr. A lot of people are doing research that really focuses on people are in the same room together, not because we don't believe in there's the power of books, there's the power of movies, the power of the things that come next, the telephone, but we think that it's very important to remember that fundamentally it's about communicating with other people, and when given the choice, we communicate with other people in the same place, so we need to understand what that future looks like as well.
I can mention that in the early days of the internet, I was invited to give a talk in Sweden. I set my slides over because I didn't want to rely on the quality of the internet to go and ruin my slides so they were pixel accurate. I spoke over telephony. I had a camera broadcasting my face and not doing a particularly good job, especially given back then. It was the last talk in this workshop, and I finished, and all the technology seemed to work properly, and then the person in charge said, okay, let's all go out and get something to drink. And it was like, remember me? Because I was not going to go to the bar with them. So there's a lot of ways we communicate, which include things like eating food together. And while there are researchers working on trying to make experiences that will give you the sense of virtual food, virtual olfaction, or virtual taste, that's not quite as long as, well along as we'd like it to be. It's going to take a while, and even if I could do that, I'll be sitting by myself, maybe drinking the same beer that they're drinking, but I'm not with them, right? It's the reason that when you meet someone that you've collaborated with, and I often collaborate with people using technology, and then the first time I'm in the same room with them, it's like, it's great to meet you, and we shake hands, and these are human things. We've evolved to basically want to go and touch each other, and see each other, and smell each other. Right, yeah.
You guys are saying my next
all
life,
here, right?
So my next life, I cannot have a virtual family. I'm so disappointed. I can't marry someone from Mars or something.
So let's, we're winding down a little bit, but I'd like to play one more clip and get you guys to react to it if that's okay. This is a man named Damien Schofield who works on, basically works on applications for virtual reality in the courtroom. And I think that's probably all.
This is what the main area of my research is, about how we can introduce bias and prejudice into the courtroom using these technologies. We can change people's memories of what happened. We can change their viewpoint. Imagine recreating a murder scene. I could show you that murder scene from the perspective of the victim, or I could show you that murder scene from the perspective of the killer. And whichever way you see it is going to give you a completely different perspective of that crime.
So how do you guys think about the perspective part of this yet again, and some of the challenges there when it comes to introducing virtual reality or augmented reality into places where it really, really matters what the perspective is and how people react to it?
Oh, I think it's a matter of fairness. If you can show it from the standpoint of the victim, show it from the standpoint of the alleged perpetrator, show it from other people's standpoints, that's good, especially if it is a correct representation of the environment. I am unfortunately reminded of a recent story about a certain president-elect who, in trying to show a model of his building relative to other ones, when the architect produced a model that was correct, said, well, why don't you make that other building a little bit shorter? Because he wanted his to be a whole lot bigger, right? When you do stuff like that, which of course you can do in VR, but in that case was being done with physical architects' models, old tech, right? You can deceive people.
Yeah.
And, you know, as we all know, the changes in lighting, changes in perspective are all important. But if you can put people in an environment in which they get the ability to try things out, see things from different viewpoints, I think that can be sort of like the leveler.
Anybody else have a reaction to that or thoughts on that?
Well, it's ironic you were saying that because I'm sitting there, you play 2 clips and I couldn't see it. Right?
Right.
So and then you have all these things that you read about where people are in other people's space in VR now, groping and all this crazy stuff. So I don't have an educated answer on this part, but I just feel like it depends on the application again and the experience. You might want to be able, you might not want 100% freedom of perspective for anyone to do something.
Right.
So imagine I'm giving a talk in VR. Maybe I don't want you to stand next to me. Maybe I want you to be here like this.
Yeah.
Or if I'm doing a brainstorming thing with you with some whiteboard that Ken and Steve create, if I draw a triangle, one of the things I really want, I just want to be able to see how you draw the triangle, almost like we're drawing together. For that case, it may be okay for me to be in your perspective, in your shoes.
So limits and restrictions can be good.
Can be good. I think it's a designer's job. And right now, with all due respect, like the design language for VR is just evolving. Nobody knows it's not like, building smartphone apps or responsive sites in the past 5 years where you got a lot of practices. They may, some of them still be wrong, but, at least there's somewhere to start. And, my last comment is, I'm not a 3D guy like these legends are, but I realize I cannot even make a simple 3D model. So to succeed in this field, it's ironic, people are 3D people, right? But then, most of us are not educated in this field unless you go to computer science graphics courses, or you're a game programmer, or architects, industrial designers, mechanical engineers, and maybe some other field professions. But majority of the people today in the information technology industry is 2D people, right? So I think talking about perspective is almost like rocket science advanced chapter, 201 before, so I feel like it would come around over time. We just need to see more examples before we can say, how do you actually design perspectives, for example?
Isabelle?
Yeah, I have a funny story with perspective. So a year ago, A&E approached us and said, so we're developing a 2D series that we're going to launch on the web called Fall Into Me. And it was on the trail of 50 Shades of Grey. They wanted to explore seduction, and they said, it's a web series, so it will be hard to get attention, so we'd like to create a VR experience to go along with it and push the viewer's experience further. So we started thinking and, looking at this series, we thought, what can VR do that 2D can't do? And one of the things that VR does really, really well is connection. When you look at someone in the eye, there's a feeling of acknowledgement that you get that is possible in VR, that connection. So it's a very, very effective tool. You were talking about celebrities earlier, like fans and their celebrities. if you put a headset and Bono is singing to you directly, I mean, it gets you in the stomach. It's crazy. So anyways, we thought, okay, it's a seduction piece. Let's build a camera rig that will give you the point of view of the girl getting seduced. So the rig we built around the actress. And as this British billionaire is seducing her, you are in the body of the girl getting seduced. And
There's some dangers there, right, in terms of how you present that.
Well,
right?
the first danger was that our production executive was a guy, which we hadn't thought about. So for him to find himself in a woman's body in a miniskirt with high heels and look down and see his breast, he
had to be comfortable with that.
He wasn't at all.
Right.
So that's the first thing we hadn't thought about. And the second thing is we had to reshoot a number of scenes because this guy just being in front of you like this completely violated all the rules of seduction and comfort in the bubble. So we had to reshoot him coming from very far away, talking to her on the phone first, appearing in the room so that during the experience you don't feel assaulted. Mm-hmm. But all that to say that the change of perspective can be so powerful in VR that producers have now a responsibility of knowing how people will feel during the experience. Much more than as a TV or film producers, we always had a responsibility of putting media and stories in the world. But because the tool of virtual reality is so powerful, that responsibility is even greater because in terms of propaganda, for example, what you can do with it, it could be dangerous. It's a beautiful thing that will allow people to travel and to, convey messages in a very powerful way. But it comes with a responsibility as well.
So wait, an alternate reality where people are seduced by an in-your-face billionaire. That doesn't sound, that worries me.
That seems like a good point to end on. The time has flown by, and we have to wrap up. But I want to thank all of our panelists, Chaki, Steve, Ken, and Isabelle. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have. I'll just do one more shameless plug. We have tote bags, and I'm happy to talk to you about Codebreaker. Please subscribe and listen. And I think we'll bring Justin back up.
Thank you all.
Yeah.